Hello, everyone. We're back with the weekly Full Funnel Live episode. Today, we are co-hosting this episode with our dear partners from Customs for Trade. We invited Joe, who is, I would say, head/VP of marketing at this company, considering the current setup.
That's very kind.
And Bowen, who is our main account-based sales development rep. Unfortunately, we are missing two more people, Astrid on the maternity leave and Trav, who is account executive. But I feel having both worlds, marketing and sales, will give everyone a pretty good perspective on ABM program that we did together. We are going to discuss the setup, the results, the improvements that ABM bring to the organization, and answer all of your most popular questions. What's the role of sales? What's the role of more specifically account-based sales rep, right? What are the key alignment points? How to report on ABM to the leadership, etc. Because guys created really cool report that they were sharing internally. So again, everybody is very welcome to ask any questions in the chat or in the Q&A section. We are going to cover all of them. And that being said, Bowen, Joe, thanks a lot for joining us. I think it would be very beneficial to start if you quickly introduce yourself, Customs for Trade, and your target audience, just to share the use case.
Sure. Bowen, do you want to go first?
Yeah, of course. So,
okay.
My name is Bowen. I'm part of the sales team at Customs for Trade, where I've been working for about a year now, where we focus mainly on companies, large companies who do a lot of manufacturing in the food manufacturing industry, for example, or like the industrial automotive sector, who do quite a lot of imports and exports and come a lot of in contact with these kinds of international trade, so to speak.
All right, thanks, Bowen. And yeah, my name's 𝗟𝗲𝗿. I've been with 𝗪C4T about 3 years now. I'm the field and partner marketing manager. As Andrei mentioned, that there should be another person with me here, Astrid, who's on her maternity leave. And we make up the marketing team at 𝗪C4T. As my title suggests, I look more after the field and partner marketing activities that go on. And then Astrid has been looking after more of the product marketing. But as we will get into a little bit later down the line, we'll then sort of talk about how the roles were divided between us in terms of sort of ABM.
Awesome. And I know that before working with us, before starting to work with us, you ran some programs that, let's say, some sort of ABM, and then you decided to focus on it more, make it kind of a core framework. And the question really is, what motivated you to do that, to focus more on ABM?
So over the years that I've been with 𝗪C4T, our team has actually got smaller at the end of the day, and we had to really kind of look at what we were doing in the marketing team or within the go-to-market team that was most successful. And we were obviously doing a lot of things. We were trying a lot of things. We are sort of quite agile in that respect, that we do sort of try out a lot of stuff as we go through. Some of it works, some of it doesn't. There hasn't been that sort of one silver magic bullet, that we found within all the activities. But we have really kind of focused down on the things that are producing the most benefit for us, which is things around like events, webinars, continuing sort of with the social media, things like that. But what actually made us kind of have a look into ABM is that I have been following you guys for many, many years, and you always managed to seem to kind of touch on the subject that we were kind of facing issues with internally. I also have my colleague Raf, who is the other person that is part of the ABM team, and we both have been following you guys for ages. It's just a case that we were then looking sort of internally. We were thinking about our plans of what we are going to be doing for the coming year. And we really wanted to stop with the sort of like spray and sort of see what sticks kind of approach to sort of our marketing. We did exactly what you just said, sort of have that process that we wanted to be able to follow, to give us kind of like metrics, things to follow, having actual process in place that we could actually then use to then help us with our lead generation and our brand awareness and things like that. So it was Raf that really kind of kicked off the actual project with our CEO. They obviously discussed it internally, thought it was a good idea, and that's when we kind of were able to move forward with you guys. But it was really just to sort of help us get a much more structured process in terms of our outreach that we're doing to our target industries, our ICPs, and things like that.
And I think what is really interesting here is just a side note, right? You mentioned a couple of different roles. You are in marketing, Raf is in sales, Raf is senior account executive. Then we have Astrid and your CEO, right? And from the perspective of multi-threading, what we always say about the buying committee engagement, you have mentioned that you were following us, Raf was following us, right? So there was some sort of account awareness beforehand, right? Which kind of facilitates the decision process. I feel this is also just maybe adding 5 cents here. A lot of ABM teams, they just literally forget this, right? Everybody wants to reach to the decision makers, and everybody wants to reach to the decision makers fast, like, for example, talking to your CEO, right? But in a nutshell, if there was only CEO decision coming back to you and saying, hey, I know this company, and I'm thinking about bringing them to our organization to help you guys. And then what would be the typical reaction, right? Why? Like, what's the intention behind this, etc. I mean, obviously talking about this. I feel this is like one of the most common issues teams are facing. They simply neglect the fact of multi-threading and creating awareness among the entire buying committee. So I just wanted to raise that point. Aside from this, I think what is really interesting right now with the hindsight, you have the results, right? How would you, and I would love to ask both of you because you have different roles at the organization, right? How would you highlight qualitative and quantitative improvements, right, that ABM brought to your organization? So it would be great to hear from you, Joe, this from the marketing perspective, and from you, Bowen, from sales development perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. So from the qualitative side of things, then, yeah, this is more sort of the touchy-feely kind of side of things, isn't it? It's more of the things around sort of like social media that we were doing, that we can't in sort of 100% say that kind of that has actually influenced into the pipeline of things. But you would then expect that if we are getting a lot more views on our posts, we're getting a lot more interaction, they're actually knowing more about what Bowen does as a role, which then kind of helps, has a knock-on effect to 𝗪cie𝘂'𝗋, and they want to kind of find out what we're actually doing. So before we had quite low interaction with our posts. We were doing all of the typical things that companies do on LinkedIn, which is our main kind of channel that we are reaching our ICPs on. And on a post for around a customer success story or something like that, we'd probably be getting between like 600 or 800 impressions on there and things. Very little interaction with it. So it wasn't great at the end of the day. We then have sort of changed our process that we are doing around sort of social media in terms of what we're actually putting out into the market. Bowen is our kind of key channel now to go onto LinkedIn, which has really helped. Bowen and I spent a lot of time on LinkedIn kind of finding out what is going to be working best on there, what's actually happening with the algorithm, how we can then use sort of the right sort of images, the right kind of structure of text and things like that. And yeah, I'm very pleased to say that kind of we've had, okay, it's not always a home run at the end of the day, but we've had some really good success with some of the posts that we've had. And Bowen has had sort of over 50,000 impressions on one post, which is unheard of for anyone within our organization, and also from the 𝗪cie𝘂'𝗋 side of things. So that has been a real great thing to see happen, and the level of interaction that we've had with people on the post is really great. Bowen really kind of has too much to kind of deal with, when sort of going through and dealing with the replies and making sort of connection requests. We've got a bit of a luxury problem in that respect. But like I say, it's not a home run every time, but yeah, we've had a real marked increase in that. And then looking at the numbers that we then track for Bone with his metrics, we then look at things like the increase in followers, the replies from our target accounts, the content impressions from the last 30 days, his profile viewers, and then also the number of meeting booked. And if you then look over the periods where we're actually sort of taking the snapshots, everything is improving quite considerably on there. We haven't had a dip in the numbers, which is great. So all those sort of key indicators are sort of improving month over month. And then, like I mentioned, off the back of that, then our 𝗬C4T followers are also increasing sort of daily, basically, because of the work that Bowen is doing, getting more eyeballs on us.
Awesome, thank you. How that reflected on you, Bowen? Because as I have heard the rumors on some event at London, you are considered as now as an industry expert, right?
Our internal influencer.
I wouldn't consider myself an industry expert yet, but let's hope so in the future. But no, definitely, like Joe mentioned before, we've been getting so many more interactions compared to before. I believe in the last month we've reached about like 200K impressions, which basically translates also to the long-term point of usage of ABM, so to speak, because we also see that we're getting involved and we get a lot more inbound requests to participate in RFIs and RFQs, whereas before some companies have never heard from 𝗬C4T before, for example. We've also recently started to make a kind of a tag plan for large accounts, whereas in the past we just reach out to one key decision maker in an organization. But in large and multinational companies, for example, it's of course not one person who makes the decision. So we've recently started to make a kind of a tag plan, multi-threading within an organization, contacting different people, interviewing different people in different roles, both like higher up and lower downs, in different parts of the organizations as well, to gain as many insights as possible, to be really able to formulate a kind of plan of attack to get 𝗬C4T in, so to speak.
And when you look at those results in terms of visibility, more engagement, obviously, like you said, you had a lot of you see the increase also in inbound opportunities, RFPs, being invited to RFQs, RFPs. You mentioned, I think, Joe, that you were also measuring things like, meetings, potentially sales qualified opportunities. And I know you have just basically implemented a pilot. This has been like about 3 months. So I wonder, do you have any other tangible results by now that you would be able to share?
I would sort of preface that by saying that we are in a niche market. We have always kind of had difficulty in terms of converting, getting sort of eyeballs on us. We're in quite like I mentioned, a niche market in that respect. We have had meetings booked, and I think Bowen can sort of vouch for this. There were some accounts that we had been sort of reaching out to that had never responded via LinkedIn, for example. And then suddenly kind of they start waking up. They either kind of want to discuss sort of customs automation with us, and they want to have a discovery call, or if they want to join our market research that we've been doing with them as well. So yes, always we always want more. We always want to do more and get more sort of opportunities created. But it's been quite interesting to see how this kind of approach, the ABM approach, has really sort of woken up some accounts that were completely silent on us, to then actually move them into the point of wanting to have a meeting with us and find out what we do.
Yeah, maybe to give an example for that, we've been in contact with this large company for a while. We've spoken to a director there, but we've never been able to get through to her boss. And now with the ABM program, contacting him on LinkedIn and doing all this stuff, we actually managed to book several meetings with him, which is a great result, I believe.
Awesome. Thank you. So I think if we'll just summarize everything that you have shared, right, it gives us a holistic benefit of creating awareness inside the target accounts, engaging the entire buying committee, making sure that they're aware of you. And it also enables sales to start meaningful engagements, right, with the key stakeholders inside these organizations. And like you said, it's not that it's home run and you just start seeing the results from the day one, but this is the kind of regular process or regular operations that you are running, and you start seeing compounding interest on everything that you are doing. If let's say if I was going to ask you now, obviously with the hindsight, right? You have all of these interactions, you have these metrics. What would you say could complicate this transition and generating these results when companies try to do it on their own without having, like you said, structured guidance or structured playbooks in place? What complicates everything?
Do you want this one, Bo?
Sure.
Okay.
I believe it's the struggles that we've been kind of having is that if you're not really into the program, or you don't see like the results immediately, or you don't receive like the market feedback on LinkedIn or from people that you're reaching out to, it's kind of difficult to quantify or kind of feel like how and what it's doing exactly. And especially translating that to higher level executives, I'd say that's a big difficulty in ABM.
So basically, it means that if you don't have structured process, right, you don't know when to expect the results, and if the results are not coming immediately, everybody starts questioning what you are doing, right? Which leads that the company or the team is likely to move back to the common, let's say, lead generation playbooks they are running for years, right? Would that be a fair?
Yeah, that would be a fair assessment. And it's also not more than logical. If you don't see, especially if you're a C-level, for example, you don't see results after a couple of months, it's logical that you start questioning it. But it's of course a long-term strategy, which doesn't, it's not a magical home run like you mentioned before. It takes time, it takes compounding, and yeah, you just need to keep on working on it, I'd say.
It's not something that is going to happen by magic. You have to put in the work for this kind of program. You need to have the sort of the resources behind you from a FTE kind of point of view. You need to have the content and the generation kind of going behind it as well. So yeah, it will not happen by magic. There is work that you need to put into this, but you need to sort of keep plugging away at it, because you will then start to see those green shoots as we did. And once we kind of got that first reaction to a love letter that we did, right back at the very beginning of the actual pilot program, that was kind of one of those nice small wins that we had to then see, okay, yeah, people do take notice of this kind of thing. And it kind of grew from there, really.
What I really find amazing is that you are in a very niche market, in a market that you don't really associate with LinkedIn. You don't really associate, people in charge of customs in big manufacturing companies hanging out on LinkedIn every day and chatting with salespeople and marketers. You shared some amazing statistics that, if I'm honest, being on LinkedIn, posting almost daily for a long time, we don't see that even on our posts. We used to see that in the past. The things have changed. So I think, like, just from the perspective, you're in that niche market where you don't expect these kind of buyers to be active, and yet you're seeing these results. So I find that just personally amazing. And then you mentioned something that I think is potentially worth diving into a little bit more. So you mentioned, okay, without having this structured support and structured approach, one of the biggest difficulties is, okay, you can start doing something, it might not give the immediate results, and then the leadership might lose patience and push you back into the old way. So that makes me wonder, how did you then report to leadership to show the progress from the start, where you knew, like you mentioned, like, okay, you won't hit the home run from the start. You won't see immediate sales coming out of those. It's a long-term program. You will need to invest in content creation. You will need to have the people set all of these things. So I wonder, how did you handle that reporting to your leadership team from the beginning, with the early and up to now? I'm really curious to dive into that.
Yeah, so we were then using the reports that you guys provide us as part of the pilot program, and that has again the metrics that we're using to track what Bowen is doing on a weekly basis in terms of his outreach via LinkedIn. Then obviously all the other qualitative stuff that we're chasing as well. But yeah, it's a difficult one. We have to manage expectations. You know, we are having. We were at that time at the end of every week. I would then provide a update to the rest of our go-to-market team about what was actually happening that week within ABM, where we'd then share some of the kind of wins that we've actually had during the course of the week. So we would try and keep people as up to date as possible with what we were doing, because not everyone within the go-to-market team has been involved in the ABM process either. So I think they are then seeing that, yes, there's a lot of resources and a lot of effort going into it, and they want to know what that is actually kind of generating. So we would do that on a weekly basis. We now internally have something called a pipeline battalion meeting, which is every few weeks, and then Bowen and I then report in that pipeline battalion meeting on kind of what has actually happened. So there's a longer period of time in between those reports that we're putting together, but that is our way of them being able to kind of bring everyone up to speed. And we again look at the qualitative and the quantitative results. So that kind of keeps our CEO in the loop of what's happening. And then it's just always a topic of conversation when I have my one-on-ones with the CEO. Then ABM is always part of that. So sort of we're trying to keep people as up to date as possible with what is actually happening. But yes, it is a long-term thing. I just had a meeting with my CEO yesterday about sort of how we are going to start measuring whether we can say that the ABM program has been a success, and that we need to kind of give it a longer period of time before we can then really say that, and we're going to do that until the end of the year. But we are all on the same page that yes, it's not going to be a silver bullet. You know, it's a long-term process that we then have to really kind of put the effort into. But yeah, that's sort of satisfying him at the moment. Yeah.
And also maybe to add on that as well, I think we looked at it at the beginning of the year, but the average sales cycle here at the company takes maybe 2 years.
Very true, yeah.
So how can you expect immediate results from ABM if the average sales cycle takes at least 2 years? Like, you can't expect it to, give immediate returns based on that statistic alone. So yeah.
But that's why important to have intermediate metrics, right, as leading indicators, so you can measure success by having these discovery calls with the buying committee, which kind of trigger the sales process, right? It's early beginning of it, and it's not the revenue, but it's just where it all starts from. So which I feel is the key. And for many companies, I would say that there is a bigger problem not even having an opportunity to create awareness inside the target accounts, and they're not even having these discovery calls at all, right? That's, for many companies, this is like a much bigger problem to deal with. One of the things that I would love to ask you, Joe, you highlighted the key report, but if you don't mind, Bowen, I would love to ask you, as you are a sales rep, would you highlight the key KPIs or the key metrics that you are tracking, let's say, on a daily or weekly basis as a part of the ABM reporting?
So some of the KPIs that I'm tracking on a daily basis is like the interactions and the outbound efforts that I'm doing, of course. Because if you don't track that, you can't really expect the desired results. but some of the metrics that we're using to report as well is like the meetings booked, of course, the conversations that we started with ICP companies where we've never had, you know, conversations with before. We recently started with doing interviews to get a sort of soft touch point to see what's going on in the market, and also as a kind of a foot in the door, because you're building brand awareness as well. You're getting to understand like the pain points of the customer, and you can immediately, you know, play in on that, so to speak. But those are some of the metrics we're tracking. I don't know if you have any to add, Joe.
I'm just looking at your report here, actually, that we look at on a weekly basis. So yeah, it's around things like leaving meaningful comments to target buyers or on thought leader posts, personalized messages or connection requests, adding target buyers to the cadence that 𝗪𝗿 will then follow for when we want to do sort of content collabs or events or seminars. Yeah, getting a buyer signed up for the event if we're having one running, the meetings booked or the conversation started, discovery calls, and then sales opportunities generated, and that's what we then track on a weekly basis.
I think what's important to highlight, if you don't mind, just one of the things that I mean, it's not obvious to track, but I feel it was very beneficial for us to track the progress, is the number of accounts in these different lists that we have for the focus and perspective, right? Cluster ICP, completely called accounts that fit our, let's say, ICP qualification criteria, but have no idea who we are and what we do, and we have no idea if they're in the market, etc., right? Then the future pipeline accounts that hit our engagement threshold, but we have no idea about their actual needs. And the active focus, those that the accounts that know us, we have some level of relationship, and we work on opportunity creation. And from that perspective, I always highlight what's beneficial to look here, right? Where you are, it's maybe a good comparison of is if you know, from the guys who are selling this you know, diets or training plans, fitness guys, right? Before after pictures. So what were your stats before the pilot and what were your stats after the pilot? Because it's essential to see as a part when you have extremely long sales cycles, right? How many accounts were moved from one list to another, right? Because the truth is, like, if they even don't aware of you, no personalization, no technology will help you to get a meeting with these accounts, right? That's the sad reality. So before able to sell to them, you need to create awareness, and just tracking that account velocity and changes in the list, right? That's one of the things that always helps to see the progress.
Yeah, that's a good question. Don't quote me on this, but I believe in the beginning, the active pipeline, we had around like 10 accounts, if I'm not mistaken.
No, I think less.
Less, even less.
3 or 4.
Might be even less indeed, but currently it has really shifted our attention to focus on accounts in the active pipeline, which is currently like 25, if I'm not mistaken.
Something around that, yeah.
25 to 30, where we can really focus on. We know there's engagement. We know they show some kind of interest in our content. So yeah, it really gives us a kind of focus to which accounts we really should be targeting, multi-threading, like contacting different buying members in the buying committee, etc.
Yeah, I mean, we still continue the weekly calls to discuss this type of thing. We have another document that we're working in where we kind of track the opportunities that we're working on, kind of any of the wins that we've had during the course of the week. And then on a Friday afternoon, we as a team come together to then focus purely on the active pipeline as well, and then get those accounts, then decide what is actually happening in those accounts. Ideally, what the next steps are going to be, what we need to be able to do. So it gives us all kind of our next step, and we know what we need to do for the next week or the next weeks or months, you know, for each of those.
It's also
go ahead.
To see the accounts move through the different pipelines, right? Because I'd say at the moment we're a little understaffed, so our ICP pipeline is growing quite big at the moment, but it's really nice to see them, go through all, making them more aware of 𝗬cie and our content, what we offer, and being able to really focus on those active accounts.
And then have that little celebration when we can actually move them out of the ABM pipeline. We've got a meeting that has been booked, or there's an actual opportunity that's been created, and once that happens, we then move them out of the pipeline, and we can celebrate that a little bit.
Absolutely, which I believe brings us to two other qualitative improvements that everybody wants to see. First of all, the pipeline coverage, right? And I mean, this is one of the typical metrics lots of companies introduced and ask their sales reps to focus on. And the second one is SDR productivity, because instead of kind of targeting hundreds or thousands of accounts, you know where you're going to spend your time, right? Because these accounts already engaging with you, you have invested time into building meaningful relationships. You have invested time to run an in-depth account research to understand the needs of these accounts, the needs of different buying committee groups, understand the KPIs and challenges and the status quo of these accounts, right? So you can come up with valuable nurturing and facilitate the opportunity generation, right? So which is the key. That, and if any sales rep would be asked, like, why you're spending all this time on preparing this documentation or reaching out to these multiple stakeholders instead of like spamming other thousands of accounts, right? You always have a good reply and a reason why. So I think these are kind of two things that's worth mentioning, and so happy to hear that you're observing this. Did you want to add something, Vlad?
No, I just found it remarkable. I was thinking about how a typical SDR or a sales development rep might go about targeting in the lists, and how this would actually look in their day-to-day life. Let me just create more accounts or more buyers, then put them in my sequence, etc. It's so different to the approach that Bowen was sharing, where it's like, okay, we have these accounts. These accounts are not more likely to respond. They're already responding. We already have some relationship with them. I don't have to figure out how to personalize our messaging, our approach, because we know exactly what their challenges are, because that was part of the process. And now we can really focus, and we know that our effectiveness out of that list that you mentioned, 25 accounts, right now is going to be much higher than in a normal approach. And another thing that I found remarkable as you were sharing that is these weekly meetings, and how you were describing that you're all coming together as a team to look at those accounts and to plan what you're going to do next. So it's not like a lonely job of Bowen, it's actually like all of you working on it, which I think is a really good segue for people to also understand when we're speaking about a team, who is part of the team, because it's not just the sales reps. We know that because you're here as well, Jill, but I'm just like highlight or maybe break it down for everybody so that they really understand how that cross-functional team looks like.
Yeah, this is one thing that I've really kind of touched on at the Full Funnel Summit that you had as well, and that's been one of the greatest things of ABM actually, is really getting us coming together as a team to then work on this together. We're a small team anyway, so it's not like we were really siloed anyway. We all knew kind of what was actually kind of happening in there, but now having this sort of ABM approach, it then has the buy-in from multiple people in the team, and it feels great that we're actually doing something that we're all agreeing together, as a way forward on it. But for our ABM team, then there's myself that is obviously doing more of the coordination with everything. Astrid was doing more of the product and the content side of things. Raf was there really as a bit of a sales kind of backup and sort of providing advice and direction as well. And then you've got Bowen that's kind of doing a lot of the grunt work with the whole sort of ABM process. But then since Astrid's gone on maternity, then I've taken on a lot of responsibilities for the content as well. So roles have sort of changed a little bit in there, but that is a really, a really core kind of team. And if you can have those individual kind of people in there that are focused on those parts, then things move quite smoothly. Whereas at the moment, kind of, I can be a little bit of a bottleneck in terms of getting the content that Bowen needs, you know, on a weekly basis and things. But it's just the nature of kind of how we are at the moment. But yeah, having that sort of core team of 4 or so people has been good for us.
You mentioned, you touched upon the responsibilities and the team setup, and I feel this is really important, as you highlighted, and Bowen already said that you are a bit understaffed, which is, again, I hope will change considering the results that you are seeing and how everything is going. But what is remarkable here is that indeed, it's not about having a big team or a big budget, because there was another question about technology, which I would ask you a little bit later about your technology stack, right? So it's not about this, but it's really about cross-functional collaboration, alignment on the direction and playbooks, right? And ownership of the processes. I think the biggest problem is like just, you know, finger point and saying, hey, it's not my responsibility, it's not my responsibility, it's not my responsibility. It's just, okay, it is what it is. This is our current setup. These are our resources. Let's split these responsibilities between us. I will take, even if it's RevOps function or it's content function or whatever, I'm going to be in charge of this. Sales is going to be in charge of this. Another sales rep works as, in this case, Raf, as a subject matter expert, and also in some sort, I mean, considering this ABM program maybe operating a bit like a VP of sales, guiding on the use case, providing insights on the account qualification criteria, etc. Right? Yeah. And in a nutshell, like, you can launch it, as you said, in the beginning with just 4 people. Now, like, the pilot team is 3 people, and the key goal now is just operationalizing and scaling it to the rest of the organization, right? Which is the key idea, and ideally get some additional resources to maintain more activities, right? And more meaningful, execute on more meaningful playbooks. So that was great. This is the most common question. The second question, I think it's the right time to ask because 3 people already voted for this question from Emma. How many accounts are part of your ABM program at any given time? I think it's good that I have mentioned that we have 3 different lists, right, that give a focus for the team. But it would be good if you can just give the ballpark number for the account lists.
Yeah, I can give you the exact numbers if you like. So what we actually do on a weekly basis is that we have a piece of software called Dealfront. You know, it's the intent data of people coming through onto our websites. Obviously, there's many different tools out there, but we had then decided on Dealfront. So on a Monday, I then look at all of the companies that have then kind of fallen into our filters based on what people are actually doing on our website. That number has really increased lately because we've just had a webinar, so people are sort of coming through from the email to the website as well. But we then look at that and then determine from that list which ones we're then going to move into our cluster ICP based on their revenue, the kind of industry that they're in, and things like that. So that cluster ICP, we've got 109 of them in there at the moment. That's sort of quite a kind of static number, always around sort of like 90 or 100 or so there. In the future pipeline, we have 63 accounts, and then the active focus, we've actually got 29. Yeah, that's the sort of numbers that we have at the moment.
I think there was a related question that Emma asked when she was signing up, but so I couldn't like share it like that. So I posted it. I want to share it here. When it comes to those accounts, we were discussing that there are different lists, and we were discussing the 25 that you're focused on. I think it's interesting to maybe address this practically. So when you said you're coming every week, you're discussing what to do with those accounts in Active Focus. Can you maybe share some examples of what marketing does, what the SDR does, field account executive, like how do you actually map this out? Maybe just share some examples of concrete actions of different team members for those accounts that you focus on.
Yeah.
Do you want to say that, Bowen?
Yeah, so from my point of view as the SDR, I'm mostly positioning myself, or trying to position myself, as a kind of thought leader on LinkedIn, trying to, gain as many impressions as possible to get, build a brand awareness. So what I mostly do on a daily basis is, commenting on people, on posts of our ICP, of people who work at our ICP companies, trying to create brand awareness, trying to, get them to know 𝗪𝗂'𝗹𝗋 as well with relevant commenting and asking like open-ended questions on certain topics that are living in our industry. I send a lot of connection requests. I'm also working on interviews right now, which is another playbook that we got from Andrei, that I also mentioned before. And of course, it's different channels that we use. It's not only LinkedIn, but also, emailing, calling, etc. And we're currently also making a kind of attack plan, like I mentioned before as well, in collaboration with the field account executive. So it's a really tight collaboration to really deep dive into the accounts, really press on the pain points, make a kind of business case, see what is relevant for them, for which people get angles, like angles from different kinds of profiles, from different kinds of views, and really try to position ourselves against the current solution, and to make a best possible kind of business case, so to speak. For marketing, you're probably the better one to speak about it.
Yeah. So I'm then actually feeding Bowen a lot of the content that he is then putting onto LinkedIn. So again, we're kind of agreeing on topics of trying to find things that are relevant to our ICPs as well. And again, there's lots of backwards and forwards between us both, trying to sort of find the right sort of content. We're also sort of trying to be smart with what we already have, with our existing kind of content, with our customer stories. We need to be doing more of this, but as we go forward, then using a tool called Align to be able to create some of those online, what's the best way to describe it? An online, what would you kind of describe it as? It's
personalized content hubs.
Yeah, a content hub, that's it, exactly. So then, using that more and using those as a way to be able to kind of track what people are actually doing with our content, and then continue doing kind of the existing things that we're already doing, but doing it in a more kind of tied up way. So as I mentioned at the very beginning, we are really doubled down on our webinars and our events and things like that, because that was really providing us with good results. So it's kind of continuing what you're doing, your current marketing stuff, but then pulling it all together in a more sort of packaged, meaningful way in the sort of ABM process.
And if you don't mind, I would just would like to drop 5 cents, because I think a lot of companies misunderstand account-based marketing completely. We have marketing, right, as a part of account-based marketing definition. But lots of companies think, okay, that should be something completely different, right? It's not the point that it should be necessarily different. It's the way how you execute on it, right? That it's not that sales are running their outbound motion in silos and marketing runs their webinars in silos, and for completely different accounts, the topics that completely make no sense for the accounts that sales are reaching out to, right? It's aligning on everything: the collateral, the narrative, the structure, what we want to say, why we want to say, who would be the best person to say this, right? Do we want to challenge the status quo of these accounts? If yes, what, right? Do we want to fix the knowledge gaps at target accounts? Basically, they don't know what they don't know, right? If yes, how we're going to do it? What would be the best example? And next, focusing all together on bringing these accounts, for example, on webinar, because for sales, it's fantastic. And Bowen, you can just maybe add your thoughts on it, right? It's a fantastic opportunity to have a few additional meaningful touch points with these accounts. Next, it's an opportunity to engage, collect feedback, and again, open the doors or ignite the conversations. Again, fantastic opportunity to re-engage some accounts in your pipeline, or some lost deals, right? Or the contacts that were, the deals that were stolen for a while. So, and then based on this, okay, thinking together, what would be, based on all of this engagement, what would be the best next meaningful steps, right? Because what I feel is that a lot of companies think that it's just like, this is some sort of completely different marketing and we don't need to touch like what we were doing. No, the difference is that it's still that same marketing, but it's aligned around specific accounts, right? And then you have a holistic strategy of one-to-many, what you guys have described, in creating awareness among your target accounts. What I feel is beneficial to say, right, when you mentioned, for example, the impressions are creating awareness, it doesn't mean that you come to LinkedIn and post something like Bowen doesn't post something like 20 tips to improve your productivity, right? Or like crying selfie or whatever, right? Not this sort of things. So we're talking about industry-specific content, right? Jobs to be done content related to the buyer persona. That's the first thing. The second one, it's one to few creating these events that are highlighting specific jobs to be done or challenges, right, or processes that would be relevant for some group of the accounts, and then following with fully personalized touch points, like which we call one-to-one for these accounts. This is essential, right? And it's also destroying another stereotype about ABM, that ABM is all about building the list, then doing some generic personalization, and then outreach. But that's not ABM. This is like the definition of a standard lead gen. And maybe marketing says, yeah, but we are running ads. Okay, if that's the definition of account-based marketing, then we are done. We don't need to have this conversation, right? This is just the definition of a typical lead generation that most companies are doing for years. So I think that's important to highlight, and just to understand that it's not drastically different way of doing the things in some sense, right? That it's not basically inventing new untapped activities or whatever activities that nobody is aware of, but it's just doing everything that you understand what works, and then you double down on this, right? That's the key, and doing it in a real cross-functional way to bring the value for the target accounts. I think that's one of the things.
Absolutely, and I think that was before we then joined the actual pilot program. We, as a team, were not sure what it was going to entail. You know, we were then discussing about what our role's going to be, what are we actually going to have to do. But I think it's a really good point to hammer home on, and we had to then also get people to understand that, it's not something that is separate to everything else that is kind of going on within your go-to-market marketing team. It's really something that is I wouldn't even say complementary. All the things that we're doing as part of ABM, you should be doing anyway. It's just putting it in a more kind of joined up process and with more structure kind of behind it, rather than doing the spray and see what kind of like sticks type thing. So yeah, I think that's a really important point to mention, that that it's not separate. It's kind of including everything that you are already doing.
We had on the previous episode, we had bench prep team, and you guys got apparently acquainted with them. And Brianna, the VP of marketing, I think she gave the best possible definition to it. ABM is not the revolution. It's an evolution of our existing go-to-market approaches in more structured, more cross-functional way with sales, right? I think this is kind of the best way to describe it. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, there were really good questions actually from the audience that I'd like to maybe tackle. I know that we have a hard stop. We don't have a lot of time. There are a couple that I would like to share because I just find them very interesting. One, 𝗪𝗵𝗁 asked, and we cannot answer that without being biased. So I just wanted to ask you, while we have you here, in your opinion, this ABM approach that we helped you implement, and I know, like Joseph, you mentioned you yourself and Raf have been following us, and I'm sure we are not the only ones you considered when you were thinking about implementing ABM. So I just wonder from your perspective, like what set this approach apart? How did you think about it? Why did you choose to work with us and maybe not with somebody else? Like, how do you look at that? How would you answer that question?
I say we didn't actually look at any other providers for it. To be fair, we saw how you were approaching it. We both had, like I say, been following you for a long while, and we thought, fine, okay, let's move forward with it. You know, we liked the content that you'd been putting out. We were joining the webinars and things like that. So yeah, that's actually not the case, no.
And so if you don't mind, now running the pilot program, do you hear the same from the target accounts you engage in? Maybe, I mean, it's not converted into revenue, right, in that sense, but do you hear something similar when you have discovery calls? Maybe, Bowen, good question to you, that you attracted their attention and they're willing to learn more.
So what is exactly the question you're...
Yeah, so I mean, from the ABM perspective, now as the benefit for your team, right? Whenever you have, because you had already quite a few discovery calls with the target accounts, right? Do you hear what do you hear from them, right? So how they describe your target accounts, how they describe maybe in some way the benefits of ABM for you, right? So they mentioned that they have heard about you and that they would like to learn. So is it the conversations are going easier? So basically the tangible impact.
Well, one of the things I've been noticing is that ABM kind of gives us a soft touch point at people like these, without like asking for a meeting immediately or like a discovery call. It gives just an open kind of conversation. For example, the interview is one way to get like their opinions on things or how it's currently going, what they don't like, what they do like, and what they would like see in a solution. So it gives a very like open kind of conversation to just talk about without being very salesy, so to speak. And I think people also like to be included in stuff like this. For example, one of the people we've talked to, he was really open to share knowledge, etc. But because he works at such a big multinational corporation, there's kind of a restriction on what he can share, especially one-on-one. So one of the things we've recently also organized is a kind of virtual roundtable bringing together experts in the industry, so they can actually share and talk openly about what they are doing and what they want to learn from others and peers in the market. And I just believe ABM brings a lot more open conversations in general, without being too pushy to sales.
Yeah, indeed. It's a lot of non-threatening kind of touch points, isn't it, really? Yeah, and also just for the fact that, again, just going back to what we said at the beginning, that Bone was actually getting responses from accounts that were completely ghosting us beforehand and stuff. So that's the other sort of result in it, isn't it?
So in a nutshell, getting the replies, creating awareness, getting more replies, having in-depth conversations to understand the needs of these accounts and whether they're in the market and when potentially they could be in the market, and if they would be, right? So how can you help? So you think about exact solutions for these companies, not just saying, hey, we have a couple of features that could be helpful for you. So that's one of the things. And if you don't mind, Vlad, before we'll pick up another question, I just wanted to ask another most popular stereotype about ABM. We already ruined the stereotype that you need to have a big team. You already mentioned how your team is structured, right? And we ended up with just now 3 people running pilot ABM. Another most common question about technology stack. Again, I know where it comes from, but there is a stereotype that you need to have a big budget to buy expensive technology to run programmatic ads, right? Without it, it's not possible to run ABM. So if you don't mind, would you highlight your technology stack and maybe just give a ballpark estimate of the cost of that stack?
Sure. So like I mentioned at the very beginning of it, then we're using that Dealfront intent data for our company that we have and the number of accounts that actually we're sort of tracking on a monthly basis. I think in total it's around sort of 2,700 per year, I think, for Dealfront. but that's obviously going to depend on kind of your company and things on that one. We also have HubSpot that is doing a lot of the behind the scenes stuff that is helping sort of Bowen track what he's actually doing, and with some workflows behind the scenes and things like that. We don't spend any money on ads. This is one of the things that we stopped doing a while ago because we were not seeing the return on the investment from them. So now it's just really all organic social that we're sort of pushing out via LinkedIn. And I think that's other than our time and resources and things, which obviously is a cost to be factored into it, the technology stack that we have, it's not much more than that, if I can think about it. I think
maybe aligned.
Bowen, or aligned, and that's very that's very reasonable. That's per user, it was only a few hundred euros per year, I think, on that one. And Bowen and I both have a subscription to that, so we can then kind of keep two things separate, because he would need to use it and create his pages for himself. I then use it to then create our resources pages after our events and our webinars and things like that. So it's kind of good just to have the two separate ones. We can kind of keep the analytics separate from those.
But these tools we were also using before we started ABM, so it's not really we needed to purchase them to be able to start ABM, to start implementing it. So
beforehand, we were doing a lot of the resources pages actually within HubSpot, but within that we were not obviously able to get any of the analytics that we'd get from Align. So we then moved it over to Align to be able to get the analytics behind it. But that was the only new thing that we actually bought as part of the ABM program.
So I think like myth busted, another myth busted there. I think you mentioned something. I think it's worth highlighting and kind of putting it in perspective or a context for people who are listening or watching us live. I think, Bo, when you mentioned, it gives you a lot, like what's different for you in ABM is that it gives you a lot of these meaningful touch points that are not salesy, that allow you to open up these conversations, etc. But why does it matter? And I think like everybody who is in sales understand that this is one of the most difficult part is getting to that conversation. But also, I think that, and you, Joe, shared also like, okay, some of the accounts we tried to get in before, we couldn't get in before. But there is another thing, if you look at it, like of all your accounts, we know that the majority of them are not buying, they're not in the market. They're not aware of you, like you shared, like the list with ICP accounts that are not aware of you is the biggest, and it's just like the fact for everybody, especially if you're not a category leader, right? So, I mean, it's just like, it's just a fact. And I think what we know also from research and from experience is that these B2B buyers, especially buyers in large companies, they prefer to buy a brand from a brand they know. Like there was a recent study, they will shortlist or select a brand they have discovered before even buying. But then you're with the paradox, right? So as a salesperson, you want to reach out, you want to create that awareness before they start buying. But I mean, if you don't have these other non-sales touches, like they will not respond. So it's a kind of a paradox that a lot of people are faced with. You want to go after those accounts, but they're not buying, so they're not responding to it, etc. So I think like just wanted to highlight how important that is for people, for salespeople, to have this kind of toolkit of different ways in which you can engage those accounts, start conversations, and also because maybe it's not the right time now, and maybe they didn't engage. Maybe you initially try to reach out to them via LinkedIn, or you invite them to that interview, right? But now instead of just like knocking on their door and say, hey, is it the right time now? Is it the right time now? You get to maybe invite them to the webinar or another. So just wanted to put that in perspective. But see that we are coming to the end of the...
Yeah, I just wanted to say, as I know, guys, you have the hard stop, so I wanted to thank you for fantastic conversation and for being transparent and open and joining us. And also would love to thank our community for fantastic questions and engagement as always. So if I didn't cover your question, don't hesitate to reach out to me or to Vlad or maybe to Joe and Bowen on LinkedIn. We're happy to answer and provide additional resources. Thank you so much. and wishing you a good luck with scaling account-based marketing now.
Thank you. Thanks for the invite.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care. Have a good one.